I want to talk publishing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in that.
You're interested in publishing. Why are you interested in publishing?
I think that it's good. Well, okay, so a couple of my friends recommended it. They thought that folks would like my poems, and so um, the ones about my mother and some of the Chinese American heritage and everything. And so they're like, hey, people are going to really like it. And so I had really tried pretty hard, like maybe 15 years ago, but I didn't feel like I really met my full potential because once I got into OPA and being VP and all of that, I got more into the
Bureaucracy, organizational,
the political thing.
OPA, Ohio Poetry Association.
Yeah, I got more into that, and I really didn't get back into the writing of it until like last year, before last year, when I when I wanted to have a project with my mom to kind of really capture her life, which I thought was very interesting, and I think her memory was starting to get a bit weaker then too. So I wanted to capture her story, and so there was more of a purpose. And so when I took the poetry novel class from online writers.com, the teacher just really loved what I was writing right away. She just loved it, and I was also reading a lot of those poetry novel books, like Brown Girl Dreaming. I really loved, and then I got to actually meet the author at Ohioana last year, which was pretty cool.
Okay.
Yeah, but I really did love her book very much, and I think my mother and I would take walks, and I would read some of those poems while we were walking.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because she loves poetry. My mom still does.
So I'm getting a lot of really helpful kind of just background information in terms of why is publishing helpful? Because I think we always want to kind of be thinking about why are we doing what we're doing. I'm very interested in behavior and like why people act. Because people don't just do things for no reason. There's always a reason. And so I think a lot of people, especially like if you're a younger poet and you're like, oh, I guess I should go to an MFA or I guess I should go to this. Like I think sometimes publishing just feels like almost like this, like the logical thing you do, but you don't really think about the real reasons why you're doing it. You're just kind of doing it because everyone else is doing it or because you see. But like this, I resonate a lot with what you're saying. You mentioned, people would like your poems. You mentioned that you have a purpose now in terms of not only finding those people who would enjoy your poems, but also publishing is a way for you to reconnect with your mom and get her story out, while she's here. And you've also had encouragement along the way. So you've had that kind of like outside external validation of sorts.
Yeah.
And I do think that's another reason why a lot of people turn to publishing is this kind of like, it's that badge that says, hey, it's not just me that thinks my stuff's good. There's other people who are respected in the field that also see what I wrote and feel like other people should see it too.
Yeah, and I think I was lucky, I guess, because I was, I missed you when you were in Salon, but, I'm a really long time member other than the 7 years that you were in there and that I wasn't. Right. But I was very lucky because they had that chapbook contest. And so, which was Lotus Leaves, right? And so that contest just showed up, and then I just basically worked on the manuscript to put it in there. And then it did, got second place. Yeah. And so it got published very quickly like that. But it wasn't that I had written those poems specifically for the chapbook. Those poems were already written. So that time there wasn't really... I think Jennifer Boswell, right? She came up with the contest, and she wanted all of us to get our work out there as chapbooks. So that was. This time it was more self-initiated, where I just thought, hey, I've got my mom's story. Let's go try this class because this is the first time I've really heard that you can actually do like a poetry novel out of your work. And then this time it felt like I could write more poems that would actually be about, my mom's life and my family and tie all of that together. So it wasn't just like, hey, here's some, contest, put it in there, which I thought it was great. I mean, I thought what Jennifer did was great because she encouraged all of us to get, our chapbooks out there, which is good.
Yeah.
But I think if it's coming from yourself, and you have a real purpose, I think it's very different. But what's interesting is I think for years, both she and Rose told me to write more and more about my family and do this years ago. But then, like I told you, I was getting all into this thing where, I wanted to do these fictional characters, which just did not really resonate with people. People kind of looked at them and thought, okay, yeah, you're writing about Lady Macbeth or something, which I did. Or some other character, or King Lear, or something like that, which I thought was interesting because I read the play or something like that, and I thought that was cool.
Maybe it was just strong audience too, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So
I think I was also strongly influenced by Carol Ann Duffy because she wrote a book that was like the Wife's World or something like that, but about all these famous wives that were wives of famous characters.
So you mentioned some of the times you've already gotten published, so then why are we here? Why are we still trying to find out about publishing? You've already gotten published.
Yeah, but not recently. And now I realize it's really hard. So that's why...
Publishing's really hard?
Yeah, it is. Now it is. Now, ever since more people, now you don't have to send out the letters, just the stamped letters. Now it's like very easy to submit. So now it's really hard. The percentages are really low for acceptances. So
that's okay. So that's interesting. I want to slow down there. So the percentages are low, but you also mentioned it's really easy to submit.
Right.
So
I don't know how to make the cut. I mean, you have to be more strategic. Like in the past, if you just sent out a whole bunch, then you would get some hits.
Okay, so yes, I agree with what you're saying to an extent, in that it's much easier now. So journals in general are getting a lot more submissions than they were in the past because you've taken away one of the points of friction.
Right.
Which was the envelope and the stamp and going to the post office and stuff.
Right, which I actually enjoyed that process.
I know we have to. It's good to find joys and elements of the process. I mean, you can still do that if you really want it.
Yeah, it's not gonna work
but you didn't enjoy it that much. It was good, but there's other options.
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing I would say is that yes, I mean it is more difficult from that standpoint, and it is more difficult in the sense that I think there's more poets now than there were, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is in general good.
Yeah. It's more popular.
At the same time, there's also more poetry written at a quality that's going to get rejected. So I don't necessarily take it to mean that it's harder to get accepted in the sense that, like, will my work stand out? I mean, there's still ways for the work to stand out just because, yes, it is easier to send submissions. And yes, there are more poets, but there's also... That's not to say that all the quality of every single submission has also gotten higher, necessarily. I think your average submission now is probably stronger than it was in the past.
I think it is.
Okay.
So yeah, so then, because of trying to navigate this new world, I think that's kind of why I knew that I need. Well, okay, I talked with you, and I realized that I needed more of a strategy, and how can I make my actual poetry stronger so that it can be more competitive?
Okay.
And that's where I am right now. I'm working on the revision part because I know I've said this many times, that maybe some folks can have the same experience that I have, where basically I would just take some critiques that I would get from a workshop, and I would just make some quick surface edits and then just send it out, because I didn't really understand what revision was all about.
Right. Okay. So I heard you highlight two things. You mentioned that you kind of want to have a publishing strategy, And you also want to find a way to make the poems stronger.
Yeah, I don't have a real strategy.
Okay. You know, by the end of our talk, I'd like us to have an idea for a publishing strategy and an idea for how to make poems stronger. So we're going to just kind of target those two things. Let's begin with strategy. What are you doing right now?
I'm basically okay. The latest thought I had was, because I had three poems that are fairly impactful, right? That we've been working on, and they're almost there in terms of a lot of revisions, as you know. So my first goal was just to get the three pieces ready and to submit them at the end of the month to the Bellevue.
So some journals, right?
Yeah, or that contest.
Okay, so so you're looking at contests.
Mm-hmm. And I thought, let's just start off because that one has three poems in it, and they're about health, and anything in terms of health, and so that's why I already have the three that we've been working on.
Okay, so I might pause you there really quick. So I think it's part of the strategy. So grouping poems together in terms of a theme, and having multiple poems adhere to that. When you're submitting, again, most places are looking for at least three to five poems. So I like that. The plan is to submit those same three poems to just a bunch of contests?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you care what contests?
I don't know, but I don't. I'm new to this contest situation. Okay. So I don't really know if there's. I'm sure there's a strategy to contests, but I know that's a very good publication, right?
It is. So the one thing I would say with contests is knowing who the judges can be really helpful. For instance, back when I was submitting more, I had a poetry chapbook that for multiple contests, it reached the short list. But multiple of those contests were judged by Tiana Clark.
The same person?
The same person at multiple contests. And so the first time I didn't know, and then it got rejected. I'm like, fine. And then the second time, I was like, oh no, Tiana's judging this. She's already seen this collection before, so she naturally also. So that being said, knowing the judge and being aware of their style, and you can decide if your style is a good fit for them. Because I think at the end of the day, like when you get far enough along in the industry, everyone's writing high quality stuff. Everyone has their own style, but everyone's writing high quality stuff. So, that's not even really the thought. No matter what collection you pick is going to be fine from a quality standpoint, So then it comes down to style, and is what I'm writing going to match? Is it similar at all to what the judge is doing? So like if you're doing like traditional verse and the judge is someone that is very experimental, that's not to say that it can't do well. Maybe they would pick it. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think I do traditional verse.
Purely as an example, right?
You mean like with meter and everything?
Sure. Or even like blank verse, or even just free verse that's not like going crazy. Yeah. With like visual elements on the page or anything like that, like not like mixed media or anything. That can kind of help determine, It's not perfect, because again, there is a chance that, I may write one way, but I got it. Thanks. I may write one way, but I might like poetry that's written another way too. It's not like it has to be one-to-one, but in general, I would be trying to send in work to judges whose work is at least a little bit reflective of my own to give it the best shot. So familiarity with the judges of the contest can be helpful. If you've had an opportunity to work with that judge before, a lot of times if it's too close, like if they were like your MFA professor or anything like that, you won't be able to get accepted in that case because your connection is too close. But like if it's just someone that maybe you met them at like AWP, or you've had some conversations with them in the past, or people they know, those sorts of things can actually be helpful. It's an industry like any other industry. Connections are helpful. Familiarity is helpful. If they've already seen your name before, it's helpful. And that's why doing things like residencies and fellowships can be good, because it gets your name out there more.
Okay.
It helps with exposure. So that's another thing too. Like if you are applying, or if you're thinking about a contest down the line and you're like, oh, this person's going to be judging it, and I see that they're doing a workshop here, maybe I'll sign up for that workshop. So those are some things to keep in mind in terms of strategy. Some other things I would say too about contests. I've mentioned this before. I was talking to Tayamba Jess, who wrote Olio, which won the Pulitzer. And he was talking about when Olio first came out, he had it going at 30 different contests at any given moment. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, even your big names are kind of doing that, And then second of all, it's a real investment. I mean, it's not like a submission costs, $100, but if you're doing a contest, your typical contest is going to run between $25, $30, sometimes even $50. So kind of have earmarked in your budget that like, hey, if I'm having this in 30 contests at any moment, 30 times 25, 30 times 50, so it's like put aside like $1,000 or whatever to just be like, all right, this is my submission money. Okay. Which is also why you gotta, if you're doing contests, understanding why you're doing the contest. I think a lot of poets are doing contests because they kind of view it as the launch pad. It's like instead of, building the rocket and fueling the rocket and doing the test runs for the rocket and then slowly trying to launch the rocket myself, the rocket's already made. I just need to enter it and then kind of let it launch. So what I would just caution is that if that is the goal, to use it as the launch pad, and it may very well do that, but it might not. More realistically, I mean, it's a small world in poetry, so if you're expecting something to be like this like super breakout thing, I think we need to be realistic. I think sometimes submitting to contests, we try to avoid the real burden of trying to create our own audience. Instead, just bank on other people's audience. Yeah, so just kind of understand your motivations for the contest. Other questions about contests in general?
I don't know. I haven't really tried it. Other than the Ohio Poetry Day contest, but those were easy.
Okay. Some other things to consider with contests too. You'll probably want to, if you're serious about this, specifically finding out the contest that you want to submit to. So you should have like a spreadsheet just has all the dates. Yeah. So that way you know when to submit and try to submit as early as possible. You want to hit the window day. Like as soon as it opens, I would try to have my poem in there ASAP. You talk to editors, and there is a clear advantage to having a manuscript that's earlier in the pile than later in the pile. Okay. Because they need to make their, and this is true for submissions as well. It's not strictly for contests. There's only a limited number of spots that they have, So you'd rather get your manuscript seen when there's 10 empty chairs versus there's one empty chair, right? Yeah. Okay. So, and that's the disadvantage of if your collection is late in the pile. They might really, really like it, but it might be, there's so many things that can go against it, right? Because it could be that they already have a book that's very similar to yours. It's on the same theme, in the list. Or it could be that they just published a collection like that recently. Or it could be, a million other factors. Mm-hmm. And so by submitting later in the game, you're increasing the amount of variables that are going to work against you. So. Okay. you want to submit early in the window, not late. I know a lot of poets submit like the final day and stuff like that, but that's not the ideal strategy.
Okay.
Not saying it's impossible. You know, I've had collections that were long listed and short listed that I submitted like the day of. So it certainly is possible, but it's
it's possible that it made it because it was the last thing they looked at. You know what I mean? It's possible.
Potentially, but still, I mean, it's not the odds I like to go at.
Right.
You know.
Right. But they remembered it because it was coming in last.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is the opposite approach.
Potentially, it's I say all that to say that if it's late in the window and you're like, oh, I should have submitted earlier, so I'm not going to submit now. Like, I wouldn't do that. I would still submit, but
just try it.
It's the earlier I can do it, the better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not to that point yet. I'm still working on getting the poems there.
Yeah. So again, to recap, create a list of the places you want to submit to.
Okay.
Try to submit as early in that window as possible. A lot of these contests are regular. A lot of these contests happen every year, and they usually happen around the same time. So it's a bit of work in the front end to get the list of contests that you want, but then you can, in general, use that list kind of year over year.
Okay.
Which will make your life easier.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I've never really done this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now what about...
Just checking one thing. I'm listening to you. What about... What?
What about, like, just trying to get into the journal? Is that...
Like
like if you have a choice between putting it into a contest versus sending it to X number of places just to get into the journal, which way would you go?
It's like contest versus journal. What's better?
Yeah.
I mean, contest will have probably larger impact because then you can put down, winner of such and such award. But even just getting in the journal is nice because you can add that to your
list
credentials too, right? It's also going to be cheaper. And the pool might be different because the contest, especially like a really big contest, you're going to be, they're going to be getting submissions from pretty big names in the field if it's if it's the bigger contest. So
they may want that name.
So the submission, like a regular submission, just like the slush piles, might be less competitive in that regard. The other thing I'll say is that a lot of times with contests, sometimes you submit. I've had this happen before. This happened with there was a contest that Indiana Review had that I submitted for, and they're like, okay, we're not going to use this for the contest, but we would like to include it in the journal. So that can happen too.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I agree.
That's why it's on your list. Yeah, your resume.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Like I said, this is new to me, so
I understand.
Yeah, but I'm just working on getting the poems going. I'm starting off with those 3.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking maybe if I just set a goal of like every month, getting 3 ready, like maybe, that would be a good thing.
It adds up over time.
Yeah, just make something that makes sense.
Yeah. Because these things take time for them to get back to you too. So even if you just did end up doing like one submission a week, you do that for a couple months on end, and you'll still probably have 15, 20 submissions out at the end of like 3 months, just because journals are slow. Yeah.
I like I said, I just kind of tried it for a month, but then I realized that I needed to kind of understand the process and improve my poems.
I understand.
Yeah.
Less traditional strategy too would be, for instance, starting your own journal. Not to publish your own work, but to kind of just get your name out and get people talking to you and seeking you out.
I don't think I'm there yet.
Okay, that's fine.
But
just kind of just
to
throw that into the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
creating your own platform.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
It is a whole other thing. This is true.
Yeah, because I would like to see it where I actually see these poems that actually reach their full potential and then actually get in somewhere.
I want to make sure before we head out that we also take a look at poems themselves, because you mentioned that you would like to know not only strategy but also how to make poems stronger.
Yeah.
So before we get to that, any other questions about strategy? Does that kind of give you some?
Yeah. I also need to know kind of a strategy as to how to look at the poems in the journal. Like, are there certain categories of poems where they're kind of falling in? Like, how do you
for contests?
Well, maybe for contests, but maybe also when you look at a journal.
Contests, right. So contests are going to be a little bit trickier because they'll have a judge that they bring in from the outside. That's not with the journal. So that can complicate things because a lot of times the way it works is that the initial readers who kind of just like get rid of like the 90% or whatever, they'll generally be from the journal. But then after that, things start becoming more reliant on the judge. So it's almost like you need to be able to have work that appeals to sometimes two very kind of different aesthetics, which can be tricky. So let's kind of talk about general submissions, and then also for those initial readers. This is where reading issues, it's the advice you always see editors saying, like, read more issues, read the back issues. And there's a lot of truth to it. You gotta know kind of what the general style is. Like, things I would be kind of looking for. This is not a list that's in any particular order. I'm going to kind of think it through with you. I would look at, are there any like general title structures that I see? Like, are they like a lot of one-word titles? Are there titles that are like telling stories inside the title? So like, just kind of start off, like just look at like that table of contents. Just kind of get an idea. Of what the vibe is. After that, I would start looking at things, for instance, like what are general line lengths that I'm seeing? Are they doing a lot of like short lines? Are they doing a lot of long lines? In the lines themselves, what kind of enjambment are they doing? Is a lot of end stop stuff? Is a lot of like unpredictable? Are they doing a lot of, for instance, what are they doing with like negative space? Is there a lot of negative space? Are there like gaps in the line? Are there not? Is there punctuation? Is there no punctuation? Thematically, what's going on? Is a lot of like eco poems? Is it more like confessional? Is it more? There's not a lot of journals. I'm thinking like, I think it's like Able Muse that still does a lot of traditional verse when they publish stuff. Or is it Pleiades? I don't know. But yeah, you're trying to get an idea of that. Look at the acknowledgments section of the people they publish to see what other journals they've been getting into, and do you see any kind of themes there? Because sometimes some journals have some similar aesthetics to each other, so you can kind of get an idea. That can also give you an idea that if this piece works well in this journal, it may also work well in these other places too. Yeah. Some other things I'd be looking for. I'd be looking at even just like the language use. Like, is it like expected language? Is it weird language? Is it more experimental? Other things I'd be looking for inside the issue is, does there feel like there's any poem in the issue that feels like I could have written that, or that I read it and I'm like, oh, that's very similar to my style. I mean, that's usually a giveaway to, I need to submit here if you feel that. Like, I personally don't get that at a ton of journals, so that's why at the times when I see it, I'm like, oh, I really got it.
You mean the style that you're writing in right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it that often, I don't think, but I also haven't been really looking.
Yeah. So those are kind of just the general ideas. Something to kind of cut down on the time for this is, if you know poets who already write in a style that's similar to yours, seeing where they were published and just kind of starting off with their publications.
Okay.
And that's actually going to help you out with your cover letter too, because you can immediately mention, you can say, oh yeah, you published this poem by this poet. So that makes them feel like you read their past issues. Right. So you're expressing some familiarity with the journal, which they like.
Yeah. Or my friend was recently published, and yeah.
Yeah. You don't even have to say recently. My friend was published in. You know, you don't have to necessarily specify when, but.
Yeah. Okay.
So in terms of like reading past issues, I wouldn't go crazy. Like I would pick like maybe 2 past issues, especially nowadays, because usually you can find some things online, and read maybe 3 or 4 poems from each issue, kind of just at random. If I could read more, I read more. It comes down to time and energy. Like submitting takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does.
I would definitely recommend if for people who are in a position to do it, pay someone else to submit for you, so you can worry about other stuff. Because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it took me a lot of time before.
And a lot of poets would rather be doing like the writing and stuff like that. You know, and it's a business expense. But anyways, those would be the things I would be considering the previous issues. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I just right now I'm kind of focused on getting more poems written, and then also revising them and understanding like where the poem needs to go, or like what it. I think I need to understand what is considered getting my poem to a certain level that's polished. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer to that, but that's a question everyone's kind of dancing with. But I can tell you some things that publications are looking for in poems, just kind of briefly. They're looking for titles that are intriguing. It's the very first thing you read. So spend time on your titles. Don't just... It always makes me nervous when a poet starts with a title and then writes the poem, because it's like, well, how do you know that the poem's going to fit the title? It's okay to have a placeholder. I'm fine with that, and maybe it will stay the same. But I think that in general, I would save the title for last. I wouldn't write it first. So once you have an understanding what the poem actually is, that would be a big recommendation. The other key moments in the poem are going to be first line, last line. First line's got a hook, last line's got a punch. You have to spend a lot of time there. It's just like if you're like writing like a news, like imagine you're a journalist. You know, the headline's really important and the first line's really important. It's the same thing in poetry. It's the same thing in video. Like if you're doing YouTube, the title's really important, the thumbnail's really important, and the first 5 seconds are really important. And that's just how presentation is in general. Same thing if you're giving a talk. Same if you're leading a meeting. Those first moments are really vital. So make sure those areas are strong. Journals in general are going to be looking for a turn or a volta. So there has to be a moment where things shift. Traditionally, that's going to happen in the final third. Like you look at most major poems by major poets these days, and there's a formula to it. You know, it's just like the hero formula. It's just like in stories, like it's like in movies and things like that. Poems have a formula too, in general.
Yeah.
So you have to have a turn, and it almost, again, like it literally, like if a poem is the whole page, it's literally going to be like right here.
Okay.
It's literally going to be there. And you have to make sure that after the turn that it's developed still. A lot of times people just rush through the ending. Make sure that the ending is justified. So that last line has to be punchy, but it has to be earned. You can't just like flip things and then expect that to be enough. You have to make sure the impact is. You have to feel satisfied.
Okay. Okay.
Which means that you have to be very honest about what you wrote. I think a lot of times when we get closer to what we feel is the end of the poem, we want to just kind of rush it and close it. We're like, come on, I'm done, it's over. When in reality, no, the poem's probably like halfway done, maybe. Okay. So when you think a poem is done, maybe just like sit with it for another 20 minutes and just see if anything else comes. And maybe it won't.
Okay.
In addition to the turn, there has to be very clear stakes. Why do we care about the speaker and what's happening to them? You don't want to make a character or have a speaker who no one cares about. You know, so why do we care about the speaker? Why does the speaker care about what they're writing about? Like if you have a poem about your mom, why is it? Don't be lazy and just say, "Oh, I wrote mom, so everyone's gonna care because I wrote mom." It's like no, every character, every new poem with every character, you have to re-examine the relationship. I can't just say mom and then assume that you're gonna put the same values onto her that I do. People have very different relationships with, for instance, like their parents. Some people like their parents, some people don't like their parents. Some people are very complicated with their parents. Maybe most people do. So you have to earn it again. Why does the speaker care about their parent? You know, why does the speaker care about if it's a lover, if it's a pet, if it's an object? Why does the speaker care about them? Okay. With stakes too, it can be helpful to kind of play through in your mind like the worst case scenarios. So like for stake, because that's what stakes are all about. Like if I lose my job, I won't be able to, you know, afford my mortgage or my rent. So I might lose that. And if I lose that, I might potentially get divorced or lose custody of my kids potentially. So it's like, you know, the things kind of snowball. So that can kind of help get an understanding of what are the stakes. Why is it really important that the speaker gets what they want?
Okay.
Poems without stakes, it's hard to get in the top tier journals, it's hard to get a poem published that doesn't have clear stakes. It's very hard.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I need to have a clear vision of what a strong poem is and what my poetry is doing.
I would try to, I think I would try to have like a couple fallback poems that like when you get stuck, they're like, all right, let me read this again. Because this is doing all the things. It might not be the style that I write, but it's doing all the things I know it needs to have.
Of my own poetry, right?
Of someone else's poems.
Oh, okay.
Someone else. I mean, if it's your own poem, cool, but I would have it from someone else, yeah.
That I really like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I always try to have them when I'm writing. I always try to have them nearby me.
Yeah, like I was using indigo and we were talking about that.
I think so. Ellen Bass's indigo. I've used that in the past as a model.
It's really good.
It's doing a lot.
I like Winter Stars, right? By Larry Levis or something.
Yeah.
Or that other one where the person falls into the grain silo.
Oh wow, that's terrifying. I haven't read that one.
Have you? Okay. It's by what's his name? I heard him read. It's about the falling in love is like
falling in a grain. Oh my god.
It's unbelievable. I heard him read it. Gramercy books.
Sounds like it's a terrifying way to go.
Yeah, it is. T.R. Hummer. Yeah, I think his name's T.R. Hummer.
Got you.
Quite an amazing poem if you see it. It's in A Poet's Companion.
I have that somewhere. Maybe I have read it.
You probably have, because Lee Young Lee's The Gift is in there. And there are quite a few really good poems in that book.
Got you.
Yeah, I think someone talked about that poem. I heard it several times. David Baker loves that poem. He used that in a workshop that I did 2 years ago.
Some other things to be thinking about. Obviously, these things are all easier said than done. But layering, having things that can take on multiple meanings, the more you can complicate the poem. You know, all poems operate on the superficial level too. But then the question becomes, you know, how can things become deeper, deeper, deeper? You know, it's one of the reasons you see people tying in a lot of Greek mythology. It's the reason you see a lot of epigraphs, because the epigraph immediately calls the person that you reference into the room of the poem as well. That's why also you see, even if people don't include an epigraph, like if they write down, you know, like after so-and-so and things like that, it also demonstrates that you're not new to the game. Because, I mean, the editor has no idea who you are if it's for most submissions. They don't know you. So they don't know if, like, you just wrote this poem yesterday, it was your first poem, or if, like, you've been in the game a while. So these are just, like, little markers that you can leave to say, hey, like, I know what I'm doing. I'm not new to this. So they can trust a bit more. Not saying that's fair, but I think it's kind of a reality for some editors. Some other just like little stylistic things like similes versus metaphors. In general, metaphors are going to be stronger than similes. The more that you can allow a metaphor to reoccur, again, like extended metaphors, again, that layers, versus just like a one-off description that you never turn to again. You know? Other just kind of general things. Make sure to register fits. So, like, you know, if the poem is taken on the perspective of a 5-year-old, that should feel very different than if the poem is being written from the perspective of a retired professor, right? It shouldn't feel the same. So word choice is really important. Other general things you've heard before: avoid cliche. If you're not sure if something's cliche, what you can do is like let's say you write a metaphor or a simile, you're like, oh my gosh, this is really, really good. Has anyone used this before? So what you can do is you can go to Google, put the simile in quotes, like, you know, put a quotation mark, put your imagery in there, and then put the end quotes, and then run it through Google, because the quotes will tell Google to find the exact match. So you can find, did I create something original, or has this already actually been used 100,000 times already? This way you can kind of check yourself to see how creative are you really.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they say most of those come from the Bible or William Shakespeare. We keep on doing the same thing over and over again. Or at least saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, again, in no specific order, but those would be the things I would be starting off with.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I just need to, right now I'm just trying to get the poems, working on the revisions and just getting them to where they're in a stronger state.
Yeah. That's how it goes.
I know.
Yeah.
I want to give it a shot. Because, see, this is the way I'm thinking about it. I never really gave it a shot in a strategic manner, just other than, you know, doing what I was doing a long time ago. And so I think that I need to give it a shot where I really give it an effort so that it's where I feel the poem and the poetry that I'm writing has reached its full potential, because I feel like I never really gave it the full effort in the past.
The one thing I would just caution, getting the poem published isn't, we think it's validation, but it's really not validation that the poem's doing what it needs to do.
Right.
And I'm not saying you're treating it that way, but that just for people thinking about publishing in general, that's the thing I would caution you.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's this is what I think. I think that in general, even if you're not even talking about publishing, what I have to say is I didn't really think about it that much recently, but then because some folks are like, hey, let's how about try it out, right? Some friends are like, hey, this this would be good. People, you can get it out there, and I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And then I'm thinking, I haven't done this in a long time. And so then I give it a shot, right? Then I come to the realization, maybe I need to work on my poetry some more. I mean, that's a good thing to come to realization.
Yeah. So I think
that realization would not have happened because I thought it was, it's fine the way it is. People like it. It's cool.
I guess a comparison I'll make is that let's compare it to running. Like a measure, you're like, I want to get healthy, so I'm going to run a marathon.
I'm not interested in that.
Just no, we're it's just as an example. Okay?
Yeah, as a metaphor.
Just okay. The marathon doesn't mean you're healthy.
No, it doesn't.
The training for the marathon is what makes you healthy. The marathon itself doesn't make you healthy. In fact, the marathon itself probably makes you worse because it wrecks your knees and it's hyper stressful on your body.
Yeah.
But the training for the marathon is the thing that makes you healthy. Because you're getting ready. It's that discipline. It's the regimen. It's the daily showing up. It's the daily effort you need to put in to get there. That's the part that makes you healthy, not the marathon itself. So in publishing, like the work to get poems ready for publishing is the work that helps the poem reach this potential, not the actually getting published.
Right. It's what helps you get there.
Right. And the work to get the poem ready is also the work that I control. I don't control if the poem gets published. I have no control over that.
Right.
So I don't want to personally put a lot of stock into something I don't have control over, because how I end up feeling is then going to be tied to a result that I don't dictate.
Right.
So why am I going to let something else determine how happy or how upset I feel?
Yeah.
I would rather have control over that. So I'm going to put all of that weight onto the poem, the editing the poem, the doing what I can, the showing up. That's what I put the stock into. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're going to try to do the best you can.
Yeah.
On your end.
Yeah. And that's where I'm going to get the joy, and that's going to give me the fulfillment. If it gets published, cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think I reached the point, I don't know if other people resonate with this, where I was still submitting stuff, but the acceptances were almost draining because I had a lot of poems out. So if a poem gets accepted, it's like, was it cool if it's accepted, but now I got to contact 20, 30 other people to say, hey, sorry, can you pull this poem? Because it was just, so it ends up being a lot more work. It was like an acceptance, took a whole other, 1 to 2 hours of work because I had to then send out all the, it just ends up taking more energy than if a poem was rejected. If a poem was rejected, great, cool, don't do a thing. I just gray it out on my spreadsheet. So easy,
That was still good though.
For sure, don't get me wrong. Hey, I'm happy to get the acceptance.
It's so good.
But
good.
I think understand everything takes work,
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Even when it's not strategic.
Even when it's not strategic.